Good afternoon. Thank you for making it this far. And we now have the final panel of today, and I think it's going to be a good one, judging by how busy the stand's been on the show floor today. We have So You Are Being Hunted, so here we go.
Hey, Jim. Hello, so I'm James Carey from Big Robot, and this is Tom Betts from Big Robot. And we're going to talk to you about So You're Being Hunted, which some of you may have already seen on the floor. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but come and have a look later or tomorrow.
What we're going to do is we're going to basically go through a little bit of background information about how we ended up getting to making this game. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we wanted to achieve with it and how we've used sort of procedural technology and a lot of little tricks to try and produce something that we wanted to make with the sort of limited resources we've got. And then hopefully at the end of that we'll have time to show a little bit of the game and have a bit of Q&A. Okay? So me and James are going to kind of like randomly swap between each other when I get bored or he butts in.
Yes, which I do a lot.
So we're a small studio with essentially a three-man team. So we haven't got a vast amount of resources. And so part of this talk is going to be how we achieve what we do without kind of that large-scale resources. So James, and I'm Tom, and Jim is currently manning the stall outside.
All on his own.
Yeah, he's all on his own. He's probably panicking.
That's fine.
This is our organisational structure here. We're running out of serfs, but we like to run a feudal kingdom.
Yeah.
And this is our planning and design docs there, which features
second draft.
Features my shopping list and a haircut appointment. So we started working together essentially when we made a game for Channel 4 called Fallen City, which is a kind of dystopian fix-em-up, I guess.
That'll do.
And we kind of really gelled well working on that project, and we thought, why shouldn't we kind of carry on and try and work on something that was sort of more our own product. Sort of into the interim, we sort of tested the waters with a little puzzle game, just to kind of see what we could achieve within a sort of small budget, tight time frame, and just sort of test the waters and see how we could tackle different sorts of distribution and so on. But all the time, we really had ideas about the sort of game we liked playing, the sort of game we wanted to make, and what did that involve. So we sort of sat down and found sort of common ground between ourselves about what it is we really didn't find enough of in PC games at the minute and what we really wanted to see and play. And that led us to producing Sir. So we'll just talk briefly about what we want to do with Sir and then sort of how we've done that.
So the kind of games that we like playing are sort of open world games where you're doing systems heavy stuff, where basically you're not relying on scripted sequences or anything like that. The stuff that happens is a result of the natural systems that are part of the game, and you exploiting those systems to your own ends. So we wanted to make a big world, first of all, that you could explore and do things at your own pace and experience in your own time. And so for us, being a small team, that meant using procedural generation, which we'll talk about a bit more later on. So basically we want a world where stuff can happen that isn't basically based on your being there. I want to be able to walk over a hill and see something happening and go, what's going on over there? I'm really interested in that. I'll go and have a look. Not because it's been planned by the designer, but because it's happening as a result of the entities that we've got moving in the world and the structure of that world itself, which for us is novel as well because it's procedurally generated. So
yeah, and kind of along the same idea, that sort of leads to have non-linear gameplay. We didn't really want to be making games that were heavily scripted, where everything was kind of predetermined, what would happen at one point, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the replayability of a game. If things do emerge and if things aren't heavily scripted, we felt you can replay that a lot of times, and every time you play it, you get kind of a new and interesting experience. So we've kind of tied that into both the way the worlds are generated for the game and also the way that the AI and all the kind of interactions occur within that space.
Yeah, so basically we started the game with the idea that we wanted to create an environment to test AI in a procedural environment. So we wanted to make somewhere where the bots themselves would be behaving in a particular way and you learn that stuff and you learn what they're doing and then you react to that rather than having it scripted for you.
So in the world that we're building in, we wanted to have like unique elements of geography and encounters. So even as designers, we wouldn't necessarily be able to predict everything that was going to happen in that space. So it was interesting for us to play as much as it was for anyone else, because every time we played it would be like, oh, that's never seen that before. That's kind of cool. Yeah, including even the village names in the game are generated as well procedurally.
So if a game's been sort of designed from the outset to be a sort of a sequence of events, then it can only ever be as interesting as the designer has made it. So it's basically, am I as a designer making this as interesting as it can be for the player? Whereas if it's built out of systems, then the interest comes from the combinations of those systems, and it's not dependent on the scope of imagination of the designer. It's dependent on the scope of their systems that they built into it.
Uh-huh. And so, again, following on up with that, we like the idea of having systems like not pure simulation, but kind of simulationist approaches, so that there are a lot of objects that can interact in various different ways to give you essentially a wide scope of how you can engage with the different sort of scenarios that might occur in the world, to sort of support lots of different types of gameplay, and again, come up with interesting kind of combinations of events.
So an example of that might be, in our game, we relied quite a lot on sound for distracting the robots to bring them to particular areas, so you can sort of combine things to make those things happen. So you might have a bottle or a rock on you that if you throw only makes a very quiet sound, but if you throw it into a group of birds who are walking around in a village, those birds will take off and clatter and make a lot more noise, and then you can use that to distract the bots from a further distance. So it's kind of combining elements within the world and the equipment that you've got to create events.
Yeah, sorry if we're like rattling through stuff, but
we push for time.
One thing we wanted to do is to basically provide people with sort of stealth and non-violent options that we kind of just sort of mentioned, to giving people the opportunity to take different approaches to a situation, and essentially we wanted to be able to support people to be able to play in that way.
So I tend to play quite violently. I tend to try and find a weapon and go straight at attacking the bots. But I know Jim, when he plays, prefers distraction stuff. So he might creep through some grass, throw a bottle over the heads of some robots. They'll hear it crash behind them, turn around, head for that. And whilst they're looking the other way, he'll run in and grab something stealthily and get away with it without ever having to engage in combat.
So to do this, we needed to do a bit of prototyping work. So we spent a bit of time after the Channel 4 project and after the other stuff we were doing to try out some experiments. So I was messing around with sort of procedural generation in terms of creating large-scale worlds, potentially infinite or within certain sort of parameters. And so we were working on various engines like this, which is a kind of huge abstract 3D terrain engine that I kind of went through various different iterations. You can sort of see some of it in more technical detail there. And then also I looked at ideas of how to produce more kind of architectural spaces. So I was taking roguelike designs and essentially transforming them into sort of three-dimensional spaces, and then sort of skinning that in a more kind of FPS environment. And those sort of processes led us to working out what we could do procedurally, what we could do to generate the world that we were just talking about wanting to make. And so those kind of bits of technology got kind of mixed together to produce what became So You're Being Hunted.
The main thrust of So You're Being Hunted is that we wanted to create a recognizably British landscape, which led us to creating what Tom's getting to, which is the British countryside generator, which is a way of us creating procedural countryside that sort of distills the essence of what we are familiar with as people who live in the UK. So we've got sort of enclosure laws, creating fields and sort of broken stone wall boundaries and areas of crops versus small Cotswoldy type villages and winding roads and areas of forest, and all that stuff being generated to create a coherent, believable world that feels sort of rurally British, but has been created out of pieces rather than made from sort of a collection of models. We're creating it as we go along.
And kind of to tie into that, we really began to fall in love with the idea of making a game that was about the kind of spaces that we sort of remember from our kind of childhood, the sort of Doctor Who kind of sort of strange English sort of psychedelia, the sort of slightly vaguely threatening nature of the British countryside, and that kind of weird combination of like robots and science fiction and marionettes and so on.
Because we've all grown up with that kind of steeped in sort of Doctor Who and the Triffids and all that kind of stuff. We want you to be scared of our game, but also laughing at it. So the robots are deadly. They'll come and get you, but they're also quite funny to look at from a distance.
So we thought it was a nice kind of world to basically kind of set the game in, and the characters reflect that kind of.
Quite dark? Is it quite dark?
The projector's very dark, isn't it? So I'm going to do a really quick, super nerdy tech stuff for all the nerdy tech people out there. Hey, nerdy tech people! Yay! All three of you. Basically, I was using a sort of series of algorithmic and mathematical techniques to generate the world, and this is how we managed to make large open spaces without having to spend lots of money or time on level design. So I used a sort of set of Voronoi sort of diagrams to partition space up using fractals to create height maps to generate an overall island. And then within the island, we would split the island up into different regions, which then had their local logic. So there's a little example of a kind of a mathematical diagram, and we thought, oh, well, they look like they could be fields. There's sort of white-lined aspects in there. So we kind of developed a bit further on that and ended up with a sort of technique that could generate an island of various different partitioned regions, which suited our theme of having a patchwork quilt England, which is essentially what we were looking for. And then the kind of the system then kind of calculates the different height levels and assigns different types of surface material and detailed textures and foliage and all different kind of aspects that come together to create the island. And then each individual area can be defined as being a churchyard or a forest or a rocky cliff or a village, and those then internally kind of assign their own models, also in a kind of mathematical procedural model.
And we also want to expose that to the player at the end of the day as well. We want those guys to be able to grab a bunch of sliders and adjust those settings. So if I want a more forested island, I can have more forested island. If I want more villages, I can have more villages, slightly hillier, more lakes, that kind of thing, so that you can really craft your own space.
I'm going to super quick through. This is just how one of the villages might be made. So we have a region which is essentially populated one step at a time with different items, which are then all kind of combined together. And this is all kind of using procedural generation to create a village, which within the game will look.
And then we draw roads between those villages and contract cells next to them so you can line them with fences and build fields off of those and that kind of thing, and create a coherent world that feels like it's connected, like people would live there and move between it logically and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we've got about 25 different types of regions: forests, copses, beaches, and so on. We keep adding to those, and some of them we have to remove because they just don't fit in with either the aesthetic or the gameplay. But it's nice to kind of have a pool of those to kind of pick between. But we do get some issues while we're doing this. I mean, part of procedural generation, it's not a magic bullet. You have to spend some time fixing issues if they go wrong and keeping an eye out for what might happen. So we've had all kinds of sort of unusual issues that have come across, including some of these screenshots are quite good. That's my first attempt at cliffs. You might think that's pretty bad, but this is my second attempt. So it doesn't always go right the first time round, but it's really interesting kind of journey as a sort of programmer and as an artist to sort of see how those things kind of reflect. There's a flooded village. Which is accurate. Yeah. For this time. And at some point, I was really battling to have flooded villages in, particularly when James figured out he could climb on one of the roofs of the houses and loot the doors from above.
Yes. So you get all kind of bugs. You get all kind of bugs and stuff that come up like that. Like one of the things we skip past quickly on the slides because we're out of time is there's a thing where we have trees that emit birds if there's noise near them. So if you're making noise near a copse of trees or something, you'll get a little cloud of birds will come out of the top. But the trouble is those birds make noise, and that was scaring other birds in other trees, and they were making noise that was scaring other birds in other trees, and so you get this Mexican wave of birds going off across the whole island. So you get things when you're doing that kind of emergent stuff, you just see that stuff coming up all the time.
Yeah. So once we kind of sorted the world bit out, we were like, okay, we have to populate this world, and we have to allow our enemies, our AI, to be able to navigate that space. And that space hasn't been designed by hand; it's built by a computer every time. So we were trying to work out what techniques we could do to allow the AI to essentially react in a way that would be at least fairly reliable over a vast range of different scenarios. And so we sort of set up a bunch of different systems. We like the AI, particularly using audio cues as well as visual cues, and that leads into the kind of parts of the gameplay where you can distract them using sounds, and you have to kind of creep about. You make more noise when you're running. There's a bunch of different interactions that you do that will draw attention. And we also wanted to have a sort of a stealth system, a cover system. And at the minute, we've also got, we're still working on our inter-AI combats, which we we have kind of mostly functional at the minute in that you can actually have periods of time where the bots will attack each other.
Because we wanted to, that stuff we were alluding to earlier on about, coming up over the ridge of a hill and seeing something happening that's nothing to do with the fact that you there as a player and have triggered a sequence. It's just a result of those guys happening to not like each other for a particular reason at that time and are fighting.
So we've got reasonably simple kind of AI state flow. This is a bit of an old model, so it's kind of moved on from there. But we're not. I mean, I've got no computer programming background, so I'm not that hung up on specific the correct way to do things. I tend to just try something until it works, and then we're like, well, if that serves the purpose, then that's what we want,
Yeah.
And it generally works pretty well at the minute. We've still got bits of tweaking to do on it.
Tell the dog story. I like the dog story.
The dog story, yeah, it's coming up. So. Yeah, we had. There's a bunch of NPCs that we're still working on that we want to go in the game. At the minute, we've got hunters and dogs and balloons that fly around and spot you. But we're going to have extra NPCs in here. I'll come back to that in a sec. But part of the things we had problems with the programming this as well, and they're all emergent problems, which are great. They're really good. It's really fun to sort of discover these and tackle. We had hunters that were walking around and thinking, "What's that loud noise at my feet?
What was that?
It's my feet." But investigating that, there was a really nice situation where there was a little bit of AI written where the hunters would stop and allow other hunters to go past if there was a blockage. But all they do is just go, "No, after you. No, no, after you. No, please." And they'd be stuck there for hours just on a street waiting
so British,
for the
we wanted to keep it in.
It's very British. We had these really nice kind of feral packs of dogs where the dogs assign an owner to themselves, and then they will follow that owner around till that owner dies. And they'll protect the owner and kind of... But what happened is I'd forgotten to not include the dogs in that. So the dogs were picking each other as owners. And what happened is that you'd get just a pack of dogs that would just run off into the hills. All live there together, chasing each other around, we're perfectly happy, We also had sort of situations where a dog would attach itself to an owner that was, miles across the island, and they'd do that kind of lassie come home thing where they just run for hundreds of miles across the landscape to try and get back to their owner.
There's a thing with that, because when the dogs find you, they pounce on you and they pin you to the ground and they make in the bark and make a load of noise, and that attracts bots. But what was happening was the dog would do that, he'd jump on you and savage you, but because his master was over the other side of the island, he'd do that and then he'd get up and carry on. Yeah. So because he's returning to his master.
He's waiting for his master, right? He's not here, I must go find him. Okay. So yeah, we had a bunch of different sort of situations like that. We've got a few more NPCs you want to mention?
Yeah, so at the minute in the game, if you go to the show floor and play, you'll see hunters, which are the main guys who patrol and guard stuff. You'll see dogs, which are the guys I was just talking about. You'll see a balloon that circles around and spots you, and if it spots you, you get a big klaxon noise, and that makes a load of noise, and that brings more bots. But we've got these made, and they're ready to go in. They're just not in the build on the show floor at the minute. We've got a squire who will patrol villages, and if you don't rob any houses in front of him, he'll just say hello. But if he catches you robbing a house, then he'll come after you and attack you. We've got a landowner, which is about twice the size of the normal hunters, and he's kind of like almost house size, and he'll stalk across the landscape, and once he finds you, you can never lose him, so you're constantly running away from him. My favourite are the horse riders, which are these guys, which are rocket-legged horses. I don't know why, I just like that. And poachers as well, which are the guys who will set traps in fens and things like that, and you can reclaim those traps or get stuck in them.
Okay, so what we're probably going to do now is, first of all, thank you anyone that's kickstarted us. We love you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we sort of got the game to a stage where we were happy enough to say, okay, we've invested some time and money into this project, and then we'll take it to Kickstarter, and that was a really good success, and we're really grateful for that. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So yeah, we're at the stage where basically you could play it on the floor, and it's pretty stable. We're pretty happy with where it is. It's actually kind of almost completable. It's just lacking some of the content, some of the features, and some of the polish. And that's our kind of next phase essentially.
Yeah, and that's coming up really soon. So within sort of about a month's time, then early access Kickstarter backers will have access, and then about a month after that, pre-orders will get in. So within about 2 months, we'll have as many people playing as want to buy the game, and then we'll really start to see whether or not these systems work, and we can develop them until we're at a stage.
It's quite interesting because from a procedural generation point of view, we might get events that only happen once every 1,000 times. And from a team of like 2-3 people playing it to opening it up to a much greater audience, that's when we really get to sort of see those how often those things might occur.
Because we're really familiar with it. We're so close to it now that we can see stuff in a particular way. But once you guys get out there and start playing it, there's going to be so many permutations that come as a direct result of the way you've tweaked the world or how you've decided to play the game that are going to just totally change how that stuff works. So it's really important that we get that feedback. And Kickstarter Early Access was a really good way of us having a contained group of people to give us that feedback. So that was good.
Okay, so James, I think, is going to play a bit of the game.
Play for a bit.
And we can do some questions, I guess. Sorry for rushing through that at like hyper speed.
Yeah, if there was anything that we sort of went through really quickly, because we know we're up against time, and you kind of, what was that? I want to know more about it. Ask, and we'll either go back to it or we'll show you guys.
I'm assuming
that should be okay. I don't know what we haven't created a wobble.
Yeah, the mouse is in a bit of a funny wobble.
Yeah, I've got a tiny little space to use the mouse, so don't judge me on this.
But it's been really interesting watching people play the game and on the floor, because you get quite familiar with it, but it's quite nice because everyone's sort of experience is unique to some degree. You know, even if they're playing similar type of islands, there's a sort of
very useful.
Thanks,
now
Walters.
you can observe your pursuers while keeping a safe distance.
Yeah, so, Walters the butler will advise you at various points.
It's kind of an unreliable narrator.
A few more of those, and we can activate the device.
So we've got Dawn. I love Dawn.
Yeah, we have a day-night cycle. It also rains approximately every 10 seconds in true English style.
Every 10 seconds, 10 seconds. and then it stops. Yeah. So that's accurate. That's feature complete. We're done with that.
Yeah, so we've got that a whole day-night cycle. We've got it's quite a bit of like ambient wildlife. We've got flocks of ravens. There you go, that fly around and so on. You can actually shoot them. We've got the little wisp. You see the little guy flying around there? He's a kind of, I guess, again, based on English folklore, he's a sort of Will-o'-the-Wisp character.
So if you know anything, you know whether or not to follow. If you know English folklore at all, you'll know kind of, do you trust Will-o'-wisps? Are they sort of leading you off the path and stuff? You have to work out whether or not they're helpful. Basically.
Yeah, sometimes they will be very helpful and sometimes they will not be helpful at all. Follow them. That's all ministers at church.
Yes, it's very loud.
So yeah, this is you become familiar not with an individual island, but with the kind of features of the world in a sense. So you may have to several times playing through it realise that there are often really valuable goods in perhaps the grand country house. So whenever you see a grand country house, you can approach that and you'll be pretty sure that something will be going on there that's worth investigating. And the same holds for a bunch of other locations. Like in the forest, you may find a load of huts, like sheds rather, and they generally don't have that much useful stuff in them, but forests are very good for hiding away because they give you a lot of cover. So there's different kind of affordances from all the different types of environment in the regions.
We didn't really talk about biomes, did we? We've got sort of this biome is the starting biome, sort of rural biome. We've also got mountains and fens and industrial sort of landscape and a castle biome coming. On the show floor at the minute, you can see the mountains region and it's a bit loud. We turned it down.
There's some guys.
Oh shit.
Right. So yeah, if you keep your distance.
Okay, somebody's seen me. I don't know who saw me. Where's that come from?
So it's not the sort of game essentially where you can play like a kind of standard AAA linear FPS where you can just dive in there and gun everybody down. Combat is quite lethal. You can even get clipped and end up bleeding, and no matter how well you've done, if you can't find access to bandages, that could be the end of your game. But we want that kind of, I guess, that sort of pacing between kind of quite wilderness exploring games, and then when something does happen, the event seems much more kind of intense because it's kind of spaced between kind of periods of exploration.
Should we take some questions if people want to ask some questions?
Yeah, go on.
So yeah, any questions in the audience, if you just want to raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you as soon as possible. We've got one just in the right over here. If you could stand up when you're answering a question, that would be incredible, thanks.
Yeah?
Just one over there.
Oh, okay, sorry. The man with the microphone.
Over there.
Just over there, on the right.
No, it's not.
Over there.
Sorry, there's another guy with a mic here as well. Your staff are fighting. It's a mic fight. Hello.
Hi. Yeah. Talking to you earlier, you said about that more robots would be introduced every 5 minutes, as such. Do you have plans for players to actually set how many robots can be introduced, or how many balloons there is, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we're still sort of tinkering with the approaches to difficulty levels in the game. We've got a lot of different kind of ideas. One of the things we want to do is give people the ability to kind of build up points as they play repeatedly, and then eventually spend those points on a sort of starting inventory. So it means that although they might not be able to dictate the pace, necessarily the difficulty, they can give themselves a bit of a head start by like having a loadout. So at the minute when you start the game, you don't have anything in your inventory, but there could be a situation where you can start yourself off on a kind of a more even footing, I guess. We might be able to give people access to the actual NPC spawning rates.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of feedback today from people saying that they'd like to sort of set... Oh, hang on a sec, hang on.
I mean, that'll be interesting. We've got a lot of plans to try and... We want to give the actual procedural generation, open that up as well, so you get to pick, essentially, the sort of ingredients for your world, so to speak, and that would be part of the kind of the palette that you get to choose from. And the ambition as well is to be able to share that with other people. The worlds can be generated from seed. At the minute, we're trying to work out how to... If you allow players to modify a lot of the details, a lot of sliders, and control the difficulty, that obviously has to go into that value. So, but I mean, it's possible to do that. So it would be nice to be able to get people to define an entire world and then share it with their friends, who can then go and play in that same environment.
Do you want to take your question now, or have you got your microphone still? Yeah, I think it should be, yeah, thanks.
Hello? Yes, it's here. Hi, you mentioned before about robots kind of fighting between themselves. I was wondering if the player was given any opportunities to kind of instigate that or cause that to happen.
So you can, basically the robots will fight for periods of time. So you could bring two rival factions of bots that you've been tracking into the same kind of area and then get them to fight. You couldn't sort of say, right, you attack this guy between the two, but you could maybe bring two groups of robots together by making noise in that particular area. Or
yeah, well, we've got a situation where you can see the robots have got kind of red visors. Now, there is a sort of option to give the two factions of robots different coloured visors, so you could spot a red group and a blue group, chuck something in the middle of them, they might both come to investigate, and then it'll kick off. So there is the kind of opportunity to do that. It's just a question of kind of balancing it so that you don't end up with like all-out warfare all the time, because these guys can roam in quite wide areas, and they're both attracted to the same kind of things. What's that?
So there's just funny procedure. We sort of generate all the village names procedurally, and I always like checking out which because
all the village names are generated too. So
I think we've got another question from this side over here.
Hello again. So one is I wanted to do a little suggestion. I think making a DLC or flooded village DLC or something like that would be really cool. Like have a bug error DLC, something like that. They all sounded amazing. Another one, and I actually have a question, which is, I remember during the Kickstarter campaign, you guys were contemplating having some sort of multiplayer included in the game, or if people give enough money and so on. Is there any status update on that, like what's happening?
So, do you want to say that?
Yeah, you do.
So, I'll just pause so I can talk to you about that. So we are planning multiplayer. Multiplayer will come after we've completed the single player, because our focus remains getting this game out to the Kickstarter backers. As we said in our Kickstarter campaign, if we got to that stretch goal, it would come after release. So yes, it is happening. We do have a plan for making it happen. We're talking to some other sort of network coders and stuff who can help us with that kind of thing. And that is happening, but it's not going to come until after the single player is done. So it'll be sort of beyond Christmas. And the way that will work is it will essentially be the same game that you get as a single player, but there'll be sort of 4 people in it. And there'll only be one of you able to get off the island. So you might cooperate to begin with to maybe sort of build up some resources and make sure everybody's got some guns and help each other out, and that's lovely. And then as you get to the end game and there's only a couple of pieces left, you might say, I'm just going to go this way for a bit and see what's over here. I'll see you later, and then maybe set a trap for him or something like that. So.
Yeah.
I think we have another question at the back over there, is that right? No? Any more questions at all? There's one right at the back over there.
Hi, 2 questions. One very simple. What kind of sick monster sets C to crouch?
Also, that's standard.
Say what you like, I don't mind.
No, I'm happy on that. Also, will you find say if you keep killing loads of robots, is that going to escalate things? Are they going to get more upset about your presence and maybe send more, or how does that?
They're actually
work?
already doing that. If at the start of the game they spend more time idling than they do sort of actively hunting around, so that as a beginning player you can kind of go and say, oh, those guys are just chatting, how close can I get to those, what can I do before they see me, kind of thing. And then as the game progresses, we unleash more of them, and we unleash different types of NPCs, but we also reduce the amount of time they spend exploring and idling in different locations, so they will actually become more predatory and hunting you sort of more often than they are idling and stuff. So that kind of thing is already in there to some degree.
But did you, I mean, I don't know if I could, was it a slightly different question, like if you play really aggressively,
Oh, I see, sorry.
will they be more aggressive? That's quite interesting. We haven't really.
No.
I mean, there is a situation when you clear them, if you kill them, there's a much higher chance of them to be respawned, and at that point they could be selected from a different NPC who is harder. So essentially, you could potentially kind of play stealthily and keep guys around.
Yeah, because you have like a cap of how many people there are in the world. We kind of try and keep the population relatively constant, in tune with how many of them we want at that particular stage. So later there are more, but we have a limit on that. And yeah, if you kill some lower level guys within that, the chances are that they might get repopulated with higher level guys. So yeah, there is something like that. Yeah, you can scare them off. Yeah, they mince away.
They mince away. There is a kind of flea state in it at the minute. Yeah, I mean, did it happen today much?
Yeah, some people did say basically if they take a certain amount of damage, they have a chance to flee. So if they take a certain amount of damage, then they roll to see, oh right, should I run away? And then if they do run away, then they run away and hide for a bit, and they'll try and stay out of sight, and they'll crouch and they'll stay away from you, which is a great opportunity to run up and bash them on the head with an axe. But
yeah, so they do have a flea state. It's if you kind of clip them without killing them, I guess.
Yeah, it's if shotguns are a great way of doing it, because you can get a lot of small damage pellets hit them in one go if you're aiming well, and that will take them down. But if you're panicked, you can just clip them with a bit.
Actually, you can sometimes see it because they've got friendly fire, so they can hit each other. Someone was playing this afternoon, and one of the robots killed one of the other ones for him while they were just either side of him shooting. So you get that kind of situation. Sometimes you get a situation where one of them will run away because their friends shot them. But that's quite nice. I quite like that.
Yeah. I think we've got time for one more question, just over here. Thanks.
So you haven't talked a great deal about win conditions. So there's the obvious survive as long as possible, but are you generating different win conditions for different games, different things to push the player towards so that you see different aspects of the generated world?
So the core of the game is to collect pieces of the teleporter device that's brought you here, which has exploded when you arrived and scattered itself across the 5 islands, about a kilometre square each, so you've got 5 kilometres of terrain to cover. Once you collect those pieces, you bring them back to the stone circle, reassemble them, and get off the island. So that's the main driver for going around. Is that kind of what you mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you always going to be just aiming at doing that, or do you have, bonus points, like say in one game, if you also manage to loot the chest in the mansion, you get score. In another game, if you manage to shoot down 10 robots, you get score, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a statistics-based report at the end of the game which tracks how many traps have been sprung, how many
times you've seen.
In fact, how many cups of tea you've drunk, which is very important. Jim insisted that went in as a separate statistic.
Yeah.
I was
not just how much food you've eaten, how much tea you've drunk.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I've got to code that in? He's like, yes, you do. So there are different kind of challenges, essentially.
You can set that for yourself, so you can kind of say, I want to do this entire run, because the main thing we wanted to sort of try and get across today was that that the game is essentially that roguelike nature where you're trying to see how far you can get within this environment, and it's not a place where you dwell for an extended period of time.
So where's the amulet of Yendor?
Yeah, we don't have that. We have talismans that can provide certain abilities to you.
We were even discussing having talismans that actually make damage to you increased. So if you want as a player to give yourself a further challenge, you can start wearing the stuff that makes you really noisy, or start running around blowing the trombone all the time.
Yeah. We have a noisy trombone that you can use to attract
If you really
bots.
want a challenge, you could do that kind of thing.
And do you get an achievement?
A personal sense of achievement.
If we get into a situation where we're going to be on scene, we can do achievements and that kind of thing, then we could do that stuff.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it there. I hope you've all enjoyed the first day of Rezzed, and hopefully we're going to see a lot of you back tomorrow. But let's end with a big round of applause for Tom, James, and So You're Being Hunted.
Where'd you go?